This Friday, PFTPM continuing from the PFT barn. We're joined now by the general manager of the Chicago Bears. He is Ryan Pace. Ryan, welcome back. How are you, pal?
I'm good, Mike. How are you, man?
Hey, I've been doing well. It's been a crazy few months. We adapt, we adjust, we move forward. And I'm curious, especially for someone in your position, now that the draft is over, you don't have the roster churn that we normally would see when you have the benefit of bringing players in, having them on the field, seeing who's working out, seeing who's not, who gets injured, who doesn't. How different is your job in the month of May, late May, than it would have been in any other year?
That's a good question, Mike, because I think this time of year, it's always exciting because it's kind of like opening up your presence. You're getting to see these players perform on the practice field. So I think there's been a little more time now devoted to sitting in on a lot of the offensive and defensive meetings, the virtual meetings. Coach Nagy's done a good job bringing in guest speakers, listening in to those guys. So I think it's been good just to kind of jump in with the X's and O's of our football team and just see. And it's good to see how engaged our players are at this time period.
But from the standpoint of getting on the field, and who knows when that's going to be, what kind of plans are you making to accelerate the missed time that especially the younger players are going to have, the draft picks, the undrafted free agents, getting them up to speed without the benefit of that opportunity in the offseason, whether it's the rookie mini camp, the OTAs, the mandatory mini camp, all those different things you ordinarily would have. How do you get guys to make up for lost time and get ready for week one?
It's a big time challenge, and I think that's where our coaches and our players have stepped up. I mean, our attendance has been 100%. Everybody's been engaged and locked in. But, Mike, you're right. For the young players, it's hard because nothing substitutes being on the field. But those guys are locked in. They're doing the best they can with the cards they're dealt. And, I think our coaches are being creative too, because it's hard to stay engaged in these virtual meetings all the time. So I think, Matt's been changing it up, making it fun, doing some creative things to keep those guys engaged and learning along the way. I think some of our veteran players have done a good job too. Is kind of taking those guys under their wing because they can hit these guys from a different perspective than our coaches can in a lot of ways. So it's really a collective effort, but it's a big time challenge.
You mentioned Coach Nagy using speakers through the technology we've all been embracing during the pandemic. Give me the one that surprised you the most from the standpoint of the power of the message, the content of the message, relative to who it was coming from.
So we've had probably almost 20 of them, And so what's interesting to me, Mike, is without naming specific names, because is the common denominators amongst a lot of these guys. You're talking about Hall of Famers from all different sports, and it usually comes down to their passion and love for the game. I mean, there's a borderline obsession, almost maniacal approach to how obsessed they are with being great. The passion for the game, their football IQ, and all these guys have been off the charts, their process. So it's just so good for our younger players and our veterans to hear that from all these guys that have been in their shoes and what they did to become great players and the sacrifices they made. It's good for all of us to hear it. It's been inspiring along the way.
You got your career started for a long period of time with the New Orleans Saints, and that was a franchise that didn't have much of a history when you joined it in 2001. Not many playoff appearances. I think maybe one postseason win right before you joined in 2001. And then you become the general manager of one of the most storied franchises in all of football. And, we were in Chicago in September, and I was saying earlier today how blown away I was by the city, by Soldier Field, by the fan support, by the atmosphere, by just that sense of history. What kind of a burden does that place on you? Do you feel that when you have that job as the general manager of a team that is one of the most iconic and historic franchises in all of football?
I think you definitely feel it. We all feel it, and I wouldn't want it any other way. I mean, that's one of the reasons why you accept a challenge like this, and it is a challenge when these jobs become available. And you said it, going into the 19th season, the excitement was off the charts because of what we did the previous year, 12-4, winning the division. So you go through last year, and it just eats at you, and we all have a bad taste in our mouth. 8-8 definitely isn't good enough. We didn't fulfill our expectations. So now it's been about everybody, don't be defensive. Everybody drop their egos. We're all humble. what can we do better to get this thing back on the track that it was on in 18? And I think we've done a lot of things this offseason to get that going, because last year was unacceptable.
And, I didn't enter into this conversation with the plan of dragging you through the mud of 2019, but you've intrigued me by that juxtaposition of what happened in 2018, 12-4, so close to winning a wild card game against the Eagles. The expectations were a lot higher last year. As you personally deconstruct what happened in 2019, have you picked up any shreds, any clues, any signs, any trends? Is it just a bad play here or there, a bad game here or there? I mean, what is it that you can see from last season that maybe can help the organization avoid that happening the next time you enter a year with high expectations and reason to have high expectations?
Yeah, Mike, I don't think, like in any season, it's never one thing. It's a plethora of things. And we can go through, it starts with personnel. It starts with me. There's some tweaks we made in that area. We had a lot of unfortunate injuries last year. I know Akeem going down, that really hurt us on defense. So there's a number of things. But I think, Matt and I talk about details from every area of our building, just locking into the details. I think, that was a factor. But again, I think some of the personnel changes we've made, some of the coaching changes we've made, staying healthy as a team, changing some of our processes, that's all been part of the kind of as we deconstructed last year and figure out what happened. It wasn't just one thing, Mike. It was a number of things. But what I like doing with Matt is, as soon as the season ends, we both look at ourselves and, hey, what can we do better? We're both very open with that, and we're both very honest with that. And I think it's just been a process to get to this point right now. And that's the one hard part about not all being together right now, is I think our team's in a good state of mind. I think everybody's a little pissed off. Everybody has a chip on their shoulder. And I would love to be carrying that momentum through the OTAs and through the mini camps. Unfortunately, we don't have that. We're going to have to pick that up in training camp when that starts, because I do feel like our team is in the right mindset right now.
I want to take you back to 2005. That was the season of the hurricane in New Orleans. Now, it didn't disrupt any of the offseason preparation. It was something that impacted the organization, the city, the state, the entire region in late August. But is there anything that you've taken from that experience, even though it was 15 years ago, to maybe help plan for how unpredictable this season may be, whether it's training camp on the road, whether it's games without fans, whether it's a week or two of the season that gets shut down, whether it's maybe having to play the home game in some other stadium? How much of what you went through personally in 2005 can help you plan for and help you plan the organization for what could come this season?
I think a lot of those experiences, and you don't even realize it when it's happening at the moment, is that there's no excuses in our league. And that happened in New Orleans during Katrina. It happened really every time a hurricane came towards that city. We quickly adapted. And what I felt from the leadership there with Sean and Mickey is there was never an excuse. It was like, let's adapt and let's adjust. And that's what we did. And from 2005 to 2006, I mean, that was a major shift in that team under trying times. But you bring in the right people, things can change quickly in our league. And we saw it in Coach Nagy's first year in 2018 in Chicago, Mike, how quick that shifted and the momentum we carried and the confidence and the swag the team played with. And we got to regain that. I mean, it's still there. We still have all the same core pieces. Again, some tweaks here and there, some tweaks to the coaching staff. But that's when I say I like where our team is right now. I like where the mindset of our team is right now. And I'm excited once we start camp, because I can feel that momentum.
You were with the Saints several seasons before Sean Payton arrived as the coach, and then you were there for nearly a decade with him as the head coach. What's something you picked up from him that you kind of still carry with you today when it comes to team building, team preparation, just what it takes to win in the NFL?
Yeah, I think first of all, he's very aggressive. So he's not afraid to make hard decisions. He's decisive, and Mickey's the same way, aggressive and decisive with those decisions. No regrets, never looks back, not afraid to think outside the box, but also very conscious of the culture of that team. And I think anytime you drift away from that, and it's easy to do, Mike, and it's an enticing to do, but usually when you do that, once you realize you've done that and you've affected the locker room, the damage is already done. By the time you try to correct yourself or release a player, the damage is already done in the locker room. So I think it's being aggressive with the moves you make, not looking back, operating with decisiveness, but then being very conscious of the culture in our locker room, because it's a fine line. I mean, 12-4 to 8-8, it's a fine line. And I think it's because of the people, the staff, and the players you have in your building, being conscious of that.
One thing I've gleaned from studying Sean Payton over the years is that he never compounds a mistake trying to justify it. If you make a mistake, you acknowledge it and you move on, even if in a roundabout way it makes you look bad by admitting the mistake. It makes you look a lot worse if you double down on the mistake, because once you realize you need to go in a different direction, that's where you go. Is that something that fuels you, that willingness to say, hey, you know what, maybe we didn't do this right, we've got to move on, instead of sticking with a plan that clearly isn't working?
100%. I think, Matt has that same blueprint from Coach Reed. And I think it comes from humility and doing what's best for the team. We used to always say that, when you're making hard decisions, what's best for the organization, and not letting your ego get in the way because, hey, this was your idea, or you selected this player, whatever it is, what's best for the team. And sometimes those are hard decisions when you have to remove emotions. But I think when you do that, you're thinking of what's best for the entire organization when you make those decisions. And for me, to be honest, Mike, I think that's come pretty natural and pretty easy. And you're probably right. It's probably because of my experience in New Orleans.
Well, and I mention that because obviously the biggest topic involving the Bears, the short-term and long-term future of quarterback Mitch Trubisky, the second pick in the 2017 draft. And I know you've surely been asked these questions in other settings, but I'm just curious to have this conversation as it relates to ultimately why the decision was made to not pick up that fifth-year option, while this is still a guy who is very much in the plans and potentially could be your starting quarterback wire to wire in 2020.
For sure. When we looked at the fifth-year option, it was a date that we had to make a decision on that move, and we had plenty of time to discuss and not having to make that decision until after the draft. So that was a collective decision amongst a lot of people. And just because we didn't exercise the fifth-year option doesn't mean that we don't believe in Mitch. I mean, we did the same thing with Kyle Fuller a couple of years ago, and it worked out really well for him. So Mitch is in a position right now, and he knows it. Matt and I met with him, and we were transparent. We were honest. It's a competition, and I think I like the way he's responded right now. He's really embraced the challenge. He's in a great spot. And so it really doesn't change anything for us. We got a lot of competition going on throughout our roster. I know the focus is on the quarterback position, but we expect him to embrace the challenge. I know Nick Foles is going to embrace the challenge, and we'll do what's best for the Bears.
When I get asked about that situation, it's very easy from my perspective. The fifth-year option, $24.8 million, the transition tender for 2019, that becomes the fifth-year option since he was a top 10 pick. If he ends up playing extremely well this year and the proverbial good problem to have arises that you have to use the franchise tag, it's not going to be all that much more than what the fifth-year option would have been anyway. So you're rolling the dice to an extent. But again, if the dice come up that way, that he plays so well this year that you would use the franchise tag, then great, so be it. We have a quarterback that we can carry into the future as a franchise guy potential.
Mike, we went over all those scenarios that you're talking about. Best case, worst case, back and forth, plenty of dialogue on that. And we were very comfortable with this, the decision. And then it just came down to, hey, communicating with Mitch, being honest and being transparent like we always are. And that's when I loved the way he approached it. I mean, I think once he digested it, you kind of see him clench his jaw and embrace it. And, hey, let's go. And I think it's going to be fun to see this play out. And again, both those guys, I know it's just been virtual meetings, but Mitch and Nick have been awesome in those meetings, completely engaged. Competition really can't start till we start rolling in training camp. But you really like the mindset of both those players. They both come in, obviously, with a lot of knowledge of the offense just from their history. So they kind of have a leg up in the times that we're dealing with right now, which has been good. But I love the way they both embraced it. It's been very healthy.
Yeah, it's a strange year to have an open competition at quarterback when you can't get onto the field. What will the timetable be once it's time to get out there, have practices, split up reps? When will the goal be to make that decision as to who the guy is to start the season?
Yeah, we haven't said, hey, this is going to be the timetable. We've just said, hey, look, it's going to be a daily evaluation for us. and obviously there's a little bit of acceleration to it. Matt and I have already talked about, playing our players more in the preseason this year. We hadn't done that as much the past 2 years. So that's going to be important to get the starters out there. There's probably about 4 different position battles I can think of throughout our roster. And I know quarterback's the focus, but there's a couple other important ones as well. So I think playing our starters through the preseason is going to be important to see that. We're hopeful we can have combined practices with the Denver Broncos. I don't know if that's going to happen. We got our fingers crossed on that. But all those moments are going to be valuable for us to really evaluate that competition along with a handful of other ones.
Just so we're on the same page, give me the other position battles that you regard as important going into camp.
I think we got some on the offensive line, specifically right guard. There's one at safety with Bush and Gibson. The right corner spot, we drafted a corner in Jalen Johnson. We signed Artie Burns. We have Kevin Tolliver, who's been on our team. So offensive line, corner, safety, quarterback, those are definitely competitions for us as we look into this training camp.
Nick Foles is one of the most enigmatic players I've ever encountered in the NFL. One thing we know for sure, he will always be the consummate teammate. If he ends up being the backup quarterback, he will support the starter in every way possible. He won't complain. He won't mope. He will be all in for the role that he's given. But if he's on the field, we've seen the ups and the downs and the highs and the lows. And what made you and Coach Nagy confident that the Nick Foles you get will be closer to the guy who was the Super Bowl MVP a couple of years ago with Philadelphia and not the guy with the Rams that looked like the fastball was gone and along with every other pitch in his tool bag?
Yeah, so we have about 4 coaches on our staff that have worked with Nick and coached Nick at different places, which I think is valuable because they've seen him at different stages of his career. So when you're evaluating the position, obviously the film and what you see on field, is an important part of the product. But I think the knowledge, Mike, that we know of Nick behind the scenes, how he deals with adversity, what kind of teammate he is, all the things that you mentioned at the start, that was huge for us to have that intimate knowledge with coaches on our staff. And as I think we went through the different styles of offenses that he's played in, what we do here in Chicago is very similar to what he was doing in Philadelphia with Coach Peterson. So I think there's a lot of commonalities there. So I think that style of play you saw in Philly with Nick, and we saw it firsthand in the playoffs, I think is something that you could expect to see in Chicago.
Couple of other topics unrelated to the Bears, but of interest this week with the virtual ownership meetings. The 4th and 15 alternative to the onside kick. It's been tabled. The impression I've gotten is that positions are mixed and split on whether or not to pivot to that as the alternative to the onside kick. What's your position on whether or not that 4th and 15 play should be available? And I guess my understanding is it would be twice per game per team to use that if they so choose.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised, Mike, when it got tabled. You could tell just the feeling around the league that everybody was split on this one. Everybody was having a hard time with it. I'm typically normally kind of a traditionalist when it comes to these things, but with this one, it's intriguing. I like the excitement of it. I think we always got to be looking at ways to develop our game and enhance our game. So this is one of those ones that I think when you first hear it, being a little bit more traditional, I said, I don't know. But the more you dug into it, it's very interesting. It's exciting. And it's something that I think we'd be interested in seeing go through. But I understand why it got tabled. I know there'll be a lot more discussion on it as we go forward.
See, sometimes when things get tabled, they just kind of go away and never come back. Do you think this is something that will resurface next year?
I definitely do, because I think there's a lot of strong opinions on it. And just talking to other GMs and head coaches around the league, I think this is something that's intriguing. Again, it adds a lot of excitement to our game. I think it was a good idea. This is something I think we just need a little more time to discuss it and make sure everybody gets comfortable with it, because it is a little outside the box. But I think it's definitely going to be something that's going to circle back around.
Last one, what do you think of the current Sky Judge experiment? And I know the league doesn't use that term. I'm not sure what term to use. It's like an enhancement of the current replay assistant role, activated by the referee, not by anyone else, a limited number of plays that can be reviewed. And again, it's experimental only for the preseason. What's your gut tell you as to whether this is going to go anywhere in 2020 or beyond?
Yeah, I think just my personal opinion, Mike, is, and I think I saw this quote, John Perry said this recently, we don't have a safety net to fix a game-changing, egregious missed call. And I think at some point we're going to have, in some facet, we're going to have to protect ourselves for that, because we don't have that right now, and nobody wants that. And we saw it, firsthand with the Saints and the Rams, and I think at some point we're just going to need a way to change, to fix a game-changing, egregious mistake. So I know that's another one of those things that's kind of been tabled a little bit. And to be honest, I think right now a lot of our focus is understandably on getting our players and staff back in the facility. So I think this year more than ever, some of these rule tweaks and proposals kind of get pushed a little bit on the back burner. Not that they should, but I think our focus is a little elsewhere right now. But I think eventually I'm in favor of that. I think it's inevitable. It's in some facet, something like that will happen.
And I think we're on the same page on that. The idea that you need to have that, what I call break glass in event of emergency option, where there is something that everyone recognizes. This is a problem. It needs to be fixed, and we need to have a mechanism for doing it now. But where's that line? And I think we learned that last year with pass interference replay review. It's one thing to say if a guy gets wiped out as the ball is coming in, yeah, obviously it's pass interference. But then you get to the closer contact and the tug of the jersey and the pull of the arm. Well, is that something that is worthy of the emergency option, or do you just let it go? And I think that's going to be the challenge for whatever the topic is under the rules. Where's the line between egregious and not egregious?
Yeah, I think that's just going to take time and experience for us to smooth all that out.
Well, Ryan, I appreciate some of your time. I'll let you get back to your Friday afternoon. We congratulate you on your success throughout your career so far. It was a great 2018. It's always good when the Bears are a playoff team, and we hope that happens again for you very soon.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Nice talking to you.
All right. Take care. Same here.
All right, man.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.